I want to talk to every last one of you who feels as if though this is your season, except everything going on around you seems to indicate differently. That, my friend, can be a very discouraging moment. And if you're not careful, you will find yourself following what's familiar, just like Israel did when they desired the melons and the onions of Egypt. I recommend your faith, because to get to the other side of what I believe that God has in store for you, it requires the supernatural. It requires the presence of God. If you notice our text this morning, when the priest who was carrying the Ark of the Covenant stood in the middle of the Jordan on dry ground, everything changed. And I know many of you don't feel as if though this is your season. And I'm here to remind you that it is. And I pray that this word will be a blessing to you and your family. Let's enjoy the word of God together. I welcome the opportunity to overwhelm you with the announcement that God is about to bring an end to your collapse. I could only hope for the opportunity to encourage the idea that your greatest test is behind you. I wish it were possible to assure you that tomorrow would be a different day, or a day of reckoning, a day of vengeance. And of course, it would be nice if we all could bypass trials and instantly get what God has promised. But that's not altogether how the process works. Because in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, Paul tucks away a revelation about evolution and change that I find incredibly amazing. If you'll notice, Paul said that we go from glory to glory. And in the brevity of these few words, from glory to glory, Paul basically sums up our entire Christian experience. Because when he makes this statement that we go from glory to glory, he reminds us that we are forever changing. He reminds us that as believers, we do not remain in the same place in life. We're always vacillating. We're always increasing. We're always going from one situation to the other. He's saying to us that nothing is secure. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is fixed. We're always revolving. We're always turning. We're always transacting. Just like a velocipede, we are perpetually moving in and out of seasons where there is no real balance, no real sobriety of judgment. And he says this because walking with the Lord means that you and I can't stay in one place before it's time to move somewhere else. That's the spirit of the text. As a matter of fact, if I could draw your attention to a few examples, God said to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, he said to him, leave your country, leave your relatives and your father's house, and go to the land I will show you, which of course means you can't stay here. You have to move. During the destruction of the Sodomites, the angel of the Lord came to Lot and told him to take his entire family and leave the city. David is another lesson, because throughout his life, he was often looking for a proverbial corner to turn to. He was always looking for refuge. And then there's Joseph, who runs from his brothers to end up becoming vizier, the most powerful person in Egypt before it was all said and done. Lastly, who can overlook the tumultuous life of Elijah, who is infamously remembered for running from Jezebel after defeating the prophets of Baal? My point is that we're always moving from one place to the other. If it's not one thing, it's another. That seems to be our motif. Just when it seems like we're going to get a break, something else happens. And after that, something else happens. And then after that, it's something else. When you weave that argument into the fabric of Joshua chapter 3, for Israel, it's a different place. It's a different reality geographically, politically, spiritually, and even physically. Israel, without question, is in a different place in her life, like many of you. And what's interesting is that in the lens of this geographical reach, this spiritual shift, Israel has to submit to the achievement of being at another location. And here's what they had to appreciate. They had to appreciate the fact that Joshua chapter 3 is not the Red Sea experience. This is not Exodus chapter 14. They had to appreciate the fact that this is not what they had just come through. This is not about Pharaoh and the plagues. This is not about horses and chariots. This is not about parting the Red Sea. This is not about the ensuing pressure of the Egyptians. But in this document, Joshua chapter 3, Israel now has to finesse how they're going to manage the Jordan River. And from personal experience, worrying about what they just came out of is not always the greatest support system. Because if this is a new place and obviously a new trial, that also means that this is a different pain. Anytime something is reoccurring or something is repetitive or different, the pain always seems aggressive, regardless as to what you and I have experienced previously. And that's what most of us struggle to overcome. We struggle to overcome the obstacle of barely passing over one thing before something else happens. We struggle with constant sickness. We struggle with uninterrupted trials, persisting distresses, endless storms, unused realities that are at times unceasing. And the reason why we struggle to accept suffering of any kind, past or present, is because our theology suggests its unfairness and its timing. Simply put, we don't like routines and schedules, especially when we just came out of a situation. It just sounds too recent to have to go through something else more. But that's what the Red Sea represents. The Red Sea represents coming out of something. It represents God moving obstructions that stand in our way. It represents overcoming. It represents surviving what tried to kill you. But the Jordan River is different in its value. It's different in its relevance. The Jordan River represents something totally different. It's about going to another level of glory. It represents the enduring metaphor of transition. It represents a different situation. It represents next level living. It's a different kind of test that's unlike the Red Sea moment. And the problem I parrot is that before you're able to heal behind one situation, here comes another test. And it just happens to be the Jordan River. You have to understand that for Joshua, crossing the Jordan River means two things. It means entering the promised land, and it means leaving the leadership of Moses. And here's what that looks like. You have to give up something in order to get something. It means letting go to go higher. It means that you and I are closer to the promise. It means we're closer to breakthrough. It's another phase of glory. And when you start getting closer to your breakthrough, as evidenced in this context, here's what you've got to prepare for. The fight intensifies. The fight escalates. The unimaginable starts happening. Unusual confusions break out. Israel is closer to the promise at the Jordan than they were when they were at the Red Sea. And because they are closer, strange activity is released. You have to understand that when breakthrough is imminent, the enemy overplays his hand. John 10:10 suggests that the enemy has come to kill, steal, and to destroy. And in that effort, the enemy will do anything he can to stop you and I from getting to that place that God has for us. This is why here recently you have had to live through some unfamiliar things. This has been one more crazy season for many of you. In fact, the closer you get to your goal, the closer you get to the promise, the closer you get to your breakthrough, the harder it gets. The Jordan River is about God testing you in different capacities. The Jordan River is about God testing you in different measures. It's about God testing you in different sizes, different dimensions. It's about crossing over to the other side. It's when you have to deal with your giants. And you've got to pass this test, because to get this far means that God is about to elevate you. He's about to raise you up. You did not come through all the stuff God just brought you out of for no apparent reason. And Joshua here in our text has a lot on the line. He's in a different place in his life, which means this is a different pressure. This is a different anxiety. It's a different worry. It's a different tension, a different stress, a different headache, a different adrenaline. Joshua is at the place of transition, and he gets down to the treacherous, swelling Jordan when it's his time to be elevated. And the Bible said nothing happens. You would think that after wandering in the desert for 40 years, this would be easy. You would think that after having strategy and sending out spies to prosecute the enemy, nothing would go wrong. You would think that after imbricating the people, everything would function properly. But by the time they get down to the Jordan River, the Bible said that the river was swelled up. And when the river swelled up, it left them with the impression that maybe this isn't their season. This text is not about what's going right. It's about everything falling apart. This text is about coming to the brink of what God has promised, and nothing happens. This text is about having faith and then having to face disappointment. It's about trusting God, but seeing no evidence of your miracle. This text is about receiving a prophecy, and it looks like it's not coming to pass. And that's the season that many of you are in right now. Many of you are in a season where it seems that nothing is happening, which means that everything around you is going wrong. Everything is swelling. Everything seems to be bigger than you are. Everything around you seems to have a sizable advantage. Everything that could be happening is happening. Everything around you is rising. And it seems to suggest that this is not your time. But let me say this to you prophetically. The swelling waters in your life is an indication that God is about to bless you. But you can't be confused between what's swelling and what God has promised. You've got to understand that the rising waters is your distraction. The swelling Jordan is your distraction. The rushing current of opposition, the streams that overwhelm us, the rivers that run deep, the consistency of floods, the undercurrent of continuous disappointment, all of these reasons will convince you that it's not your time. But I encourage you to hold fast to your faith, even if that means that your test makes no sense. It is your time. And I encourage you to step into your season because you're getting ready to cross over on dry ground. God's not going to let you drown in debt. He's not going to let you drown in defeat. God's not going to let you drown in unfulfillment or disappointment. He's not going to let you drown in failure or regret. Because when your time comes, even when it's flood season, nothing will be able to stop you. It's your season. Walk out on faith and trust God, even if you can't see your way. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for your time. And thank you for allowing me to come into your homes. Until the next time, you be encouraged.